Dzień dobry Państwu, to jest ABSL Summit w Krakowie. Ja nazywam się Dominika Pietrzyk, a w studiu Dziennika Gazety Prawnej jest pan Dinesh Nirmal, który jest Senior Vice President w IBM Software. Zapraszamy na rozmowę. Good morning.
Morning.
We will talk a little about AI revolution in the beginning I would like to ask you the most general but I think crucial question. When do you think we will reach AGI, Artificial General Intelligence?
That's a really good question. So I will answer it in a different way because I think what is most important is less of a destination, but more of a journey. And why do I say that? If you look at automobile as an example, everyone wants to get to a self-driving car because that's nirvana. You get into the car, you press a button, you put a destination in, it goes and takes you there and drops you off. But we are not there yet. While there are self-driving cars, many people don't use it. I think it's the same on AI. While we would like to get to the artificial general intelligence, it's a destination, there's a journey involved. But in that journey, there's so many other benefits, just like a car. You use the car today, it saves you time. It takes you from a place to another place. All those things happens, but people are more focused on the self-driving car, which is the end destination. Same thing here, the end destination, we should focus, but there's so many use cases that can be solved today using AI. If you look at the medical side of things, right? You can feed thousands and thousands of documents into a model to train the model to answer a medical specific question that a doctor probably cannot because of the enormity of data involved. You can create applications and code that a single developer could not write today using generative AI. So there's so many benefits and use cases that we can take advantage of using generative AI today that we should focus on. And I don't think anybody knows when that AGI will come. But in the meantime, let's make sure we use AI and generative AI to its full potential, because what it can unlock from a value perspective for humankind is huge and humongous.
There's many benefits, but there's also many concerns. And I think that the experts' debate about AI issue is quite polarized now. We have personalities like Elon Musk who are warning of challenges for humanity connected with this AI development. And we have those who are enthusiastic about this growth. And what should maybe normal people, not AI experts, not companies, know and think about this technology, where they should see some challenges and the possibilities for benefits?
I think a normal individual should be very excited about AI because I think AI, generative AI, will change the way we communicate or commerce. Why do I say that? Because now let's say you are an individual who is using a banking application. You hit a problem. You call the customer service. You get excellent service because of generative AI, because a customer service rep now have all the documentation at his or her fingertips because of generative AI. You can feed all the questions about a product into a model, and that model can answer all your questions. So you as an end user is benefiting through a customer service agent because of generative AI. The 5 minutes you had to wait previously has been cut short to 5 seconds because of generative AI. So those are the benefit that you're getting because of generative AI and AI. That's what individuals should be excited about. Or a company can now produce 10,000 lines of code it could not write before because of generative AI. They can create applications that they could not create because of a shortage of skills today using generative AI. Those are the things that people should be excited about, because that is the unlock of value that generative AI brings, even for someone who is an end user or a normal individual who is not interacting using generative AI, somehow is being touched using AI and generative AI through the applications they're using every day.
But when they are listening about some concerns, what we can tell these people to show them the not only challenges but these benefits as well, because there's many points about all these things which will happen, for example, on labor market or something.
So I look it from a positive perspective, which is it's not about replacing an individual, it's about augmenting an individual. So if I'm a developer, I have a large development organization worldwide. My developers say, is generative AI going to take my jobs away? And my answer is potentially not, because generative AI will make you a better developer. Generative AI will help you be more productive. Generative AI will optimize the code that you're producing, and it will help you write the 10,000 lines of code you could not write last year because of generative AI. So I look at it from a totally positive perspective to say, of course, there's always going to be some hurdles, some negativity associated with any new technology. But to me, the future is bright. The potential of AI and generative AI is huge. Will it get into some bad actors? Will there be some side effects of it? Of course. But if you look at the mainstream and if you look at the future, this is like a revolution we never had that will enable us to be more productive, more optimized, more customer friendly, and being able to make our life a lot easier.
Okay, maybe let's go to more technical issues. I would like to ask you, should generative AI models be open source? Because there are many opinions on this matter. In March, we had a report commissioned by the US government, which was prepared by 3 external experts, and they write about open source models like a danger tool in the hands of bad actors, and they recommended outlawing the open source models. What do you think about this?
So if you go to Hugging Face, there's 696,000 models out there. 696,000 models. So there's plenty of models out there. A lot of them created with open source. I think what differentiates is that enterprises are not going to go use any models. They will use models created by companies like IBM that has been trained or prompt engineered using trusted data. So that is the way most enterprises, if not all enterprises, will use generative AI models, is using a model from a trusted vendor like IBM. But open source is a mechanism that has been around for decades that enables innovations to flourish. So limiting open source is not the way we probably want to control models getting into the wrong hands, because open source really helps innovations. Open source enables productivity. Open source brings more developers to the foray. All those things are very positive. So we got to look at a different way to say, how do we prevent models getting into the hand of wrong actors? But for most enterprises, I think models will come from vendors like IBM, who has trusted models that has been trained on trusted data.
And how do you understand open source model? Because now we have an argument of Elon Musk and OpenAI about OpenAI and the definition of open source model. It's open source because it's open to every user, or it's open because we know the code and the training data set?
So not just because something is open source doesn't mean it's open. There's multiple license mechanism whereby which you could prevent or limit usage of a model or a technology, even in open source. So just calling something an open source doesn't make it completely open. There are ways to limit access to it, right? Through a licensing mechanism. So to answer your question, I don't think people should take it literally when something is called open, that it's open to everyone. You can limit it using licensing, even in the open source world, to make sure that who is contributing code into that open source technology, who have access to that open source technology, how you can fork it or modify the code into that open source technology. So there is a lot of ways to control and fence that technology from not getting into the wrong hands or being able to use or abuse that technology. So just because it says open doesn't always mean it's totally open.
Okay, so thank you for an explanation. Another issue is bottlenecks of AI development. Which of these bottlenecks will be the biggest one in your opinion? Computing power, data assets for training, new models, energy supplies, semiconductors, maybe another one?
So I think many of those things that you said could play a role, but I would categorize into 3 or 4. One is data, because underlying of anything that is related to AI is all around data. If you don't have trusted data to train a model in the regular AI, or prompt engineer and fine tune a model in generative AI, it doesn't mean anything. So you need the trusted, clean, good data to make the model really productive and accurate. So data becomes very critical. And for enterprises, right, how do I get trusted data to my data scientist or to my prompt engineers to make sure the model is fine-tuned using that data? So that's one thing. The second aspect that enterprises will be focused on around AI is, how do I make sure that once I have a model, my applications can call that model and the model gets deployed? How do I govern that model? What is the risk associated with that model? What is the compliance? What is the governance of that model? Is the model hallucinating? Does the model have drift in there? Is the model biased? All that is very important to the enterprises. So once you deploy the model, how do you govern the model becomes very important. That's the second aspect. The third one is, what problem am I solving? What is the pain point that I have that I can solve using AI and generative AI? And then what is the cost I have to pay for it? Because you cannot just say answer to everything is AI and generative AI. You have to say, what problem are you solving with that generative AI or AI? And what pain point will I solve using that? And then what is the cost that you're willing to pay for to solve that problem, right? So those are the 3, which is the use case that comes into it. So when I bring AI into my enterprise, what is the problem that I'm solving? So if I take my own example, right? Can I bring generative AI into my development organization to write 100,000 lines of code using generative AI that will make my developers more productive and more optimized for the future? Or will that code create issues whereby which my developers have to spend more time debugging it, right? So that's why I said third element of it is, how do I make sure there's a pain point, there's a use case, and what am I willing to pay for that pain point and use case becomes also very important. Last but not least is also a cultural element, a grassroots efforts, because many of these enterprises have been around for decades. There's multiple personas and multiple, divisions that exist within an enterprise. How do you bring everybody together to say, this use case solve your problem, this use case, this pain point will solve that problem, and here's the value you get out of it. So if you can bring all these 3-4 things into the forefront, I think generative AI can unlock great amounts of value for an everyday person, but also enterprises.
You mentioned trusted data, and referring to this, I would like to ask you about synthetic data, because many companies are preparing synthetic data nowadays to train their models. What do you think about this idea? Synthetic data could be a trusted data?
Well, usually synthetic data is artificially generated data. It is based on your data. While it is synthetically generated data, it does take the corpus of your data and create that data. So it's not too far fetched from your trusted data. But a lot of enterprises use synthetic data. Why? Because if you look at the core data, the trusted data, a lot of times it contains very personal information. They don't want to release that personal information, or they call it the PI data, for regulatory purposes. So what is the easiest way to do it? You can mask that data, or you can, recreate that data using synthetic data. The problem with masking the data or being, ironing out some of the fields is that you might not get the level of accuracy you expect. But with synthetic data or artificially generated data, you could still get the level of accuracy, but you change a lot of the fields to meet your demands and needs.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask you about some regulatory questions. How will the AI Act, in your opinion, influence on development of large language models? Because the founders of these models will be obliged to publish some summaries of the data used to train these models, and these models have been already trained, so it couldn't be so easy. And from the other hand, EU is a big and wealthy market, so it's important to meet these regulatory challenges, and how it will influence to the development of AI.
I think that's a really good question. And if you look back at us, IBM as a company, we from day one said this will all come to trusted data. How can we really take trusted data and really publish the source of data that we are using to train our models? So if you look at our set of models called Granite models, which is the large language models that we have put out there for chat or code, we have published where did we use the data to train that model from. I think it's a good thing that regulatory elements like AI Act will force other vendors also to say, this is where we came up with the data that has been used to train the model with. I think it's important because people want to know if you're going to use a model within an enterprise or a company, especially government organizations. I want to know what kind of data has been used to train these models. Because eventually the data that you have used is what the model is trained on, and that's the accuracy you will get, or the answers you will get, because that's the data that has been used. So it's good and important for everyone to know what data has been used.
Okay. And what about the AI models? Can you tell us about some black box AI? Do we have such models on our market that we don't know how this model think about many issues, and we lost control about these models? Or it's rather some mythology than the truth?
Well, look, anytime you have a pretty large enough model, there is a chance that explainability is not easy. You cannot explain that model. So, for example, you have a large model whereby which you're using in your banking application. That application decides or that model decides not to give a loan to a particular individual. Now a regulator can come and ask, why didn't you give that loan? That's where explainability comes in. You have to explain to that regulator why that decision was made and how that decision was made. So there are instances where a large model, a neural net, as we call it, might not be able to explain the reason behind that decision. In those cases, it becomes very tricky. But many companies and vendors are already working to make sure, like you talked about Act and all those things, the regulatory body is coming by saying that if you are going to use a model, you also have to explain how that decision is made.
Okay, and the last but not least question is about the challenges. Challenges which will be the most important for businesses in the next 5 years connected with digitalization and this AI transformation. What will be these challenges in your opinion?
Well, I think everybody sees the potential. Everybody sees the value of AI and generative AI. I don't think anybody will hesitate to say, look, I want to use generative AI because I can serve my customers better. I want to use generative AI or AI because I can produce more code. So I think all that is very positive. The challenge is for enterprises to understand, I want to infuse generative AI. How do I infuse it into my 30-year-old applications or 20-year-old application or 10-year-old application? Because none of these enterprises was born in the last 2 years. They have been around for a long time. Same thing with government agencies. How do you infuse generative AI or AI into these applications is where they unlock the value. How do I do that? Two, I go back to my earlier point. What is the pain point? What problem are you trying to solve? And what is the cost you're willing to pay? So the 1 and 2 are tied. 3, the culture aspect of it, which is, do I have buy-in from all the stakeholders to make sure, because otherwise you will be spinning cycles because I agree, but you don't agree. You agree, but I don't agree. That happens in every large enterprises. Last but not least, the data. I truly believe the data is a positive aspect, but it's also a limiting factor because enterprises will need that trained data available to their practitioners, to their data scientists, to their prompt engineers to make their model come out accurately for them to really unlock the value of generative AI and AI.
Thank you for our conversation.
Thank you.
Gościem dziennika Gazety Prawnej był pan Dinesh Nirmal z IBM Software. Dziękujemy.